and we can get started. So, I'm really excited today because today I want to speak about and demo something and look through something that I've been looking on for a long time. And it's one of my babies, which is APOC, the um, standard library for Neo4j. So if you want to learn more about APOC, you can just Google it. Actually, let's just Google it and see what happens. So there's the GitHub repository. There is the APOC documentation and developer page, and we should also have a labs page. I also did a bunch of videos already a while ago on YouTube. So if you go to r.neo4j.com/APOC videos, you should see these videos in a playlist. And we'll add today's video to the playlist as well. And actually what I wanted to show you is Neo4j Labs, because APOC is a labs project. And under Neo4j Labs, you find all the labs projects, and APOC is here. And so it has a labs page which also links to all these things, to the repo, to the docs, to the playlist and articles around APOC as well. So if you want to learn more, there's a lot of other cool stuff. So again, repo, where you can get different releases if you need to download them manually, but usually you don't have to. And then documentation, which you're continuously improving. So if you have any feedback for the documentation, feel free to send your feedback here. And here's the developer page that kind of explains a little bit how to install APOC and how to get started with it. Okay, what's really cool is also if you start a Neo4j sandbox. Let's see, let me do this in the background. Then APOC is already installed, and also Neo4j Aura APOC is already installed, so you can just launch a blank sandbox here. And in Aura it's also installed, and also if you use the Neo4j Docker image, then there's a command line parameter that allows you to load APOC directly in Docker. So you see there's an environment variable, Neo4j Labs plugins, APOC, and you can pass in a JSON list of plugins that you want to install, for instance, APOC or Graph Data Science or things like that. And that gives you APOC as such. One small, and in Neo4j Desktop, which I have here, which I want to use today, we can also install APOC really quickly. So let me call my database APOC Fun. Use the latest Neo4j version, and we can either use add plugin here, but usually I do use the manage tab of databases. While it's doing this, we can actually look at the sandbox. So we started the sandbox, and I just want to show you that in our sandbox, yes, thank you, Will and Ryan. Version. So Neo4j sandbox comes also with APOC as well. And so in desktop we have our database here, and we can go to manage, and then under plugins you can install different plugins like Graph Data Science, Graph Algorithms, Neo4j Streams. Soon again, GraphQL, I'm kind of currently working on that to clean out the old GraphQL plugin and make it slimmer and use the Java GraphQL library that we wrote. So APOC, let's install APOC. So you click on this button, and it basically downloads the APOC jar, and there's a plugins folder here that you can get here from your open menu. And here you see it added the APOC jar. So it downloads the release from GitHub and then puts it here. And the other thing that it does is adds the setting at the end, I think. We can actually search here APOC. So you see it adds the unrestricted setting for APOC because a bunch of the APOC procedures use internal APIs. If you don't want this and you want to be more safe, then you can just comment out or remove this line. Otherwise, all the other APOC procedures should still work after that. Okay, our database has not started yet, so we can just start a database. So while we're doing this, there's something else that's really cool, which is the APOC documentation app. So Neo4j Desktop has a ton of different apps that you can install. And if you go to the Graph App Gallery, that kind of is a list of the apps that you can install through this here. And my colleague Adam actually built an APOC Users Guide graph app that you can install. So we just click on install, and then on Linux, my installation thing doesn't work. So we can basically, does it copy this link? Good question. So I get this link from the registry, and I can just use this link as well. So I have to fix the deep link for desktop to that the install looks again on Linux. So here's our desktop, and we can just paste this URL in here and click install, which will install our APOC graph app. And it's basically the APOC docs that I showed you here. The APOC docs packaged as a graph app. So you can run them directly in your browser, and you can do cool things here. So let's see, it's still downloading. Yes. So and if I start this app and get a really nice documentation of APOC in my graph app. Come on. So it doesn't seem to like me right now. So I have to check what's wrong here. But let's not waste our time with this. But let's rather look at how we can use APOC directly now. So you can either, depending on where you are, you can either use sandbox or desktop with APOC. So in desktop, I started my database, and now we can basically start a Neo4j browser. I usually use Command or Control K to start a browser, but you can also go back here and start the database with Neo4j browser here. Click. And so what I want to use as a dataset is our well-known and well-loved Stack Overflow dataset that we used before, which is loading data from Web API. So if you go to the APOC docs, you can find load JSON here in loading data from Web APIs. And here there's this Stack Overflow API demo, which I want to use later in the APOC. So APOC has a ton of built-in procedures. So the most important thing to know about APOC is it has built-in help. So I can just say call apoc.help. And then, for instance, if I want to refactor something in my graph, I just put in a refactor, and it shows me what are the procedures and functions to help me with refactoring, and also shows documentation and the signature of the procedures. So APOC packages all its functionality in procedures and functions, so you can integrate them into all your cipher statements as such. So for instance, if you want to, let's say, format a date, so you can say APOC help date, and it says, okay, for instance, there's, it also finds validate, which is kind of fun. So APOC date converts, so it converts timestamps into each other, but there's also APOC date format. And there's also APOC temporal format. So for instance, something really simple to do with APOC is, if I have an timestamp, like an ISO timestamp, I want to format it as a date, so I just call APOC date format, and then say, okay, this is milliseconds, and I want to format this as year, month, day, and 24 hours, minutes, seconds. Right, and then I get it in this format. Right. So if I want to switch stuff around, like if you want to confuse Americans, then you can just do it like this, and they are completely confused because they don't know anymore what the month is and what the year is, what the day is. So there's a lot of conversion functions in APOC. There's a lot of utilities of any kind. So if you search anything, APOC help is your first place to go to. The help has also a searchable list. So if you rather want to have that, then you can actually search here. So for instance, if I search here for format, then I also see all the things that do something like format, and we just use APOC date format to get this. Right? You can also parse the date again, so which is super useful if you get strings and you want to parse the date. And you can also, with the new date time temporal functions and types in Neo4j, you can also parse a date into a date time, for instance, or format and temporal value like date time into something like that, right? So we have temporal and then just format. So if I just do, instead of timestamp, I use date time here. It should, it complains because it's the wrong function. It should be APOC temporal.format, and then it does the same. So it supports both the long values and the new datetime values. By the way, if you have APOC seconds, then you just say seconds here instead of milliseconds, and then you get the right format as well. Okay. So one of the most useful things in APOC is loading data from an API, as we already looked at in the past, and I want to explore this a little bit more. So APOC load JSON. So APOC can load data from JSON, from CSV, from Excel, from XML, from HTML, and GraphML as well. And it supports actually as sources, not just HTTP, but also compressed. It supports redirects. Local file access is governed by some config variables. So if I have, for instance, if I take this Stack Overflow URL here and go to my terminal in desktop, because you can also open in terminal with our desktop here. I go into the import directory, and then I just curl this URL. Come on. Oops. Why does it not work? Paste. Oh, I don't know. And we just put it into Stack Overflow JSON, and then oops. Why don't I have GQ installed? So GQ is a super useful utility, and I don't know why I don't have GQ installed here. Come on. ManDB. So, okay. So, oops. Oh, so Stack Overflow by default sends compressed things. Yeah, so you see it's actually JSON but gzipped. So okay, now let's look at it again. What? Items. Hello. Oh. Okay. That's better. We see that this is our representation of the Stack Overflow API, right? So, and I can, because it's an input, I usually can access this file. If I try to do this with APOC, with APOC load JSON file so.json, then it complains that APOC import file enabled equals true is not set. APOC import file enabled equals true. And so we have to basically go to our manage tab here. And so for some of the options, I can do it in config. So I just apply this change. And while we're on it, we can also just add APOC export file enable, so that's file system access. So if you're cautious and don't want to have anyone writing to your file system or reading from your file system, then don't do this. So it restarts the database. By the way, in the settings dialog, you can also change heap sizes and things like that, which I actually can do as well. Oh no, let's leave this for time being. So it's restarting the database. It's still empty. And now if you use APOC load JSON with this file, it should actually allow us to access the file. So that means if you have web APIs that have kind of low rate limits and you want to play around with them while you're playing around and don't want to access the API, you can also put the results of the API into a file, and then you can use that instead. So what is it doing? Starting. Let's just start. Okay, come on. I'm not sure why it's hanging here. Oh, there. No idea what happened there. Okay, so if you now access the file, you should get the data. Oops. Okay, let's try this again. So here we get the data. So we see our quota has more and items are our Stack Overflow questions, right? So I could do the same with the URL from the API directly. And as I said before, as APOC automatically supports redirects and things like compression, so you don't have to do decompress or anything. It automatically does all this stuff for you. So it returns its thing as value here, and if you want to do something with this value, then we need to yield this yield value, and then we can, for instance, say, or let's just do this here, and then from now on, let's use the local file so that we're not taking too much strain on the Stack Overflow API. So this is kind of the same request, just coming fresh from Stack Overflow. Okay, cool. So we can use this for now because it's local. So yield value, which would return the same basically. If I do return value, it would just return the same thing. But what's more interesting is now to access the fields of this value. So we can say, for instance, value dot has more or size of value dot items, which is our array here. And if you do this, then it says, yeah, has more true, as you can see, and we have 100 questions because you asked for 100 questions from Stack Overflow. So now this item thing is interesting, right? So because now we can do stuff. So let's say we can say unwind value dot items as question, return count star should return in 100 again because it's in 100 questions, and we can also say return keys of questions. So we would see what are all the attributes of a question here, right? And we also see question has also an owner, and question has also where's it? Text, body markdown, favorite count, and comments and so on, right? So we could, for instance, also return the keys of q.owner. So there's kind of dot syntax that we can use as such. And then we just want to see it for the first question, right? So we know kind of what attributes are in our question, in our poster of the question, for instance, right? So and one cool feature in APOC is that you can do a lot of things with map operations. So quick detour. So we'll come back to this, but quick detour. Ceph allows you to create maps, right? So I can just say we create a map, right? So that's easy. What's harder is to have work with multiple maps and, for instance, merge them together, right? So, or I want to add something to a map. So if we start with these two maps as our starting point, for instance, we want to return APOC map merge A, B. So it basically merges the two maps together, right? Which is not possible in Ceph itself. You could say, I want to create a map actually. I can say APOC map from pairs, and then you basically provide a list of lists, and then you say A, 42, B, 12 or so, right? So then it creates a map from a list of pairs, which could be data that you get from anywhere, right? And there's also an from list, or at least if I remember correctly. Oops, this does not work. So actually, if I don't remember correctly, I usually just ask APOC help. And then it's from lists plural, right? So I have either two lists, keys and values, which is quite useful, and then I have also from values. That's what I meant. So actually, I want to have from values. Oops. So this is kind of my from values map, and I could also say from pairs, which is then A, B in one list, and the two values in the second list, right? From lists, so which is the same. Oops, that's the comma. Okay, so but what's cool with these lists is so for instance, if I merge them together manually here, in APOC there are also functions, for instance, that say APOC map remove key, and then I can just say this is my map and I want to remove the key A, and then I get a map back that has only one key or minus one key. You can also say add key. Add key. Oh no, it's called set key. So we can say we want to add C and 13 or something like that. Sorry, the wrong positioning. Oh, cool. And you can also do lots of other operations on the maps. One operation that's super useful for import is APOC map clean. That's why I'm talking about all this map stuff. So APOC map clean is really cool because it allows you to take a data map, like a map we might get from our API. Let's clean this out real quick. Yeah. A map that we get from our API, like this one, and imagine you're not interested in all the attributes, you're only interested in some attributes, right? So You don't want to see 0 values, for instance, like score 0. I'm not interested in that, or edited false. I might not be interested in that. And I might only want to be interested in some things. So APOC map clean allows you to take a map and then say, I want to skip these keys, and I want to skip these values. So for instance, I don't want to have null, I don't want to have 0, I don't want to have false, I don't want to have empty string, and let's see, if some people are superstitious, they don't want to have the 13 here as well, right? And then we can just run this, and then it should only be B left in our map. And that's what I actually want to show you. So that's something that we can use in our import here. So for instance, if we, here we see all the keys in our question and keys in our owner. And if we want to return Q, just the first question, then it would be a map like this. And imagine for creating questions, we're only interested in the title. There are two options. So either I explicitly say what I want to get from this map, which is actually possible with Cypher's built-in syntax. So I can, because I can say I can use pattern comprehension, map projections, which says I want to have only the title, I want to have only the score, I only want to have the, let's say, text and ID, right, as minimal. So that's something that I can do already out of the box with Cypher, hopefully. Oh, yeah, right, score, ID, title. Oh, it's not ID, it's called question ID or something like that. There's it. Yeah, question ID. So that's one option that I can use. Right. And it's really weird it's centered here. No, so I have to let my colleagues know. And then the other thing, if you want to do the reverse, so you don't want to have a positive filter, but you want to have a negative filter, so you want to filter out fields, you would say APOC map clean, and then you provide the map, which is Q in our case, and I want to say I don't want to have these fields, and I don't have to have these values. So the values I don't want is null, 0, false. I also am not interested in common answers. I don't want to have the owner for now. And what else? And perhaps the body markdown. So this is basically everything except these keys and except these values, right? And then if you run this, we see we get the share link, the link, it's kind of duplicate, last activity date, creation date, title, question ID, view count, tags. So we don't get like up and downwards because they're all 0, so we don't need to store them actually, because why do you want to store 0 values? You don't get is answered because it's false, and so only the relevant fields are left. So we probably would remove one of these question at one of these links as well, and then we would be good, right? So and then we could say, okay, we want to remove share link, right? So we only leave the link. So now next step, we could kind of convert the dates to something that's an internal date of Neo4j. So this is epoch seconds. So if you do epoch date format seconds, then this should be a reasonable date. Yep, it's from today. And so if what you could do is then in the next step kind of format these dates as well, and create out data. So what we can now do basically is to say we create questions from that, right? So I just can say create question and set q equals minimal. So all the properties that we have here are now transferred into our question, right? So if I do this, it should create 100 nodes. Oops. Oh, already have q. Okay, do we have an array here which is not? So this is an array of string. That's weird. See another array here? Can't see anything. So this is just a string array tags, right? Oh, there might be something else that we're not seeing in the first one. So let's just return the minimal ones and see what we get here. There might be something like something else. Text last editor is new. So we can filter out last editor. So how could we find this out otherwise? We could just say return keys minimal comma count stars. We would just group that and would see which fields come up how frequently. So we have 12 times this, 6 times this. So the last editor thing is here new. 7 times this. And so we can see basically how the different ones differ. So I guess we can just remove the last editor here for the time being. And then we can, oops, sorry, I meant the other one. By the way, to go up and down in multi-line, you just press Control or Command arrow up and down, and then you can get there. Last editor. Super. Now it created 100 questions, and we should have these questions in our database, and now we can start playing with them. So that's a quick way of creating data. Imagine this would not be like 5 properties that you can spell out basically, but these would be like 20 or 25 properties or so that you want to clean up and only want to store the minimal amount of data, right? So which is really nice. So that's a useful APOC function as well that I use quite a lot. So imagine now we have a lot of data, right? So and we want to process a lot of data. So the problem is that Neo4j Instant Transactional Database creates an memory overlay of your data in transit or your updates in transit, and if you don't have enough memory to keep that, it will die on you. So for instance, if I say I want to create 10 million nodes, that's 100,000, this is 1 million, let's say 5 million nodes, right? So then we have, let's see, perhaps, or let's do 10 million so that we know that it probably fails. So node ID, then we have name is, let's say, mark plus ID, and then we have age is ID modulo 100. So we just created a bunch of people, so person, and these people know each other. So we just create also some relationship between them, right? So this creates 10 million nodes, 10 million relationships. And if you run this, it will basically spin for a while, and then we should see in Neo4j desktop. If you look at the logs, it starts to thrash memory, right? So we see these kind of cheesy pauses. happening. So it tries to get in memory. It doesn't have enough memory because our config says only use, where's it? Yeah. Our config says only use 1 gig memory. And so it tries to find a memory, it doesn't find it. Okay, we can terminate this query. And we can use APOC to the rescue. So APOC is a really cool function called APOC. By the way, with escape, you can make this big or large. So call APOC periodic iterate, which is a super helpful function because it helps you batching updates. It means updates of any kind, right? So if you use our query that we just used, periodic iterate consists of 2 parts. So the first query returns or provides the data to be operated on, and then the second query actually is doing the work. So this is kind of a stream of data. Do something with data, right? And then you have something like batch size 1000, and then you can say parallel true if the operation that you do can be parallelized, and that's really nice. So, and if I want to run this, I can actually use what I just had in my query, unline range of 1 to 10, 1 to 3, 1 to 3, as ID, return ID. So that's my first statement. This will return 10 million IDs, right? And do something with data is basically what we had here. We wanted to create a person with an ID. Name is Mark plus ID, or let's use another team member like Kareem plus ID, and age is ID modulo 100, and then this node knows itself, right? So that's our do statement. So this provides 10 million IDs, and here it basically runs this statement for each ID. But it does 1,000 IDs at a time in one transaction. And because it's also clever, it actually prepends, takes the whole batch, prepends your statement with an unwind of this batch, and then does only one cipher query per batch and not one query per ID, which is something that made a big difference in execution time. So, and if you want to run this, let's see, then it will execute in parallel on all my CPUs. And you see we have 10 million IDs, and we create batches of 1,000. So that means we have 10,000 transactions that it creates and runs, right? And if you want to see what's happening here, is kind of executing all these things, but I actually want to show you is kind of top, or htop, sorry, which shows us all CPUs are busy, and which is really nice, right? And in IO top, we also see, sudo IO top. It writes, depending on your disk. So currently it only writes a few megabytes per second, so it should actually write more megs per second. Basically doing this, and it's progressing through the workload and without running out of memory. Right? So, and if you see it, this should grow as well, the database size. I hope it Oh shit! I just realized it's creating a few more nodes because I misspelled this here to n. So a person P knows another person n. So it's 20 million nodes and 10 million relationships, not 10 million nodes. Okay, and so it continues to run, and while it's doing that, we can look at some other stuff. I think it takes like a minute or so without OBS. So with OBS, it could be longer. So what else can APOC do? We can look at the keys. We can clean out the data. We can also refactor things, right? So for instance, if we say we want to take our questions and, for instance, extract the text into its own node, then we should be able to do this as well. Or let's look what else can we do. So we can load from relation databases as well. And what's actually cool about periodic iterate, something that I want to show you, your load JSON can also be displayed here. So imagine we had our question query. This one, right? And imagine this file would not contain like just 100 questions, but like millions of questions, or you had a relational database that provided you lots of data, or Mongo, or Elasticsearch, or CSV, and 5 or 10 terabyte CSV file, or whatever, right? Then you can just use periodic iterate as well, where you basically say, see, it's done. So it created 10,000 transactions, totally 10 million operations, and now our poor little database has 20 million nodes and 10 million relationships, right? And on disk, it's actually, let's see, 500 megabytes. So, and it took us 228 seconds to create that data while OBS was running. So, and oh, by the way, if you want to get rid of the data, that's also quite useful to use APOC periodic iterate here. So, because deleting data also consumes stuff. So, what we can do is we can just match nodes, and then just say here detach, delete n, and because they are all interconnected, or let's delete our people first and then the other ones, right? So we just delete all the people first and then the other ones. So it should get rid of 10 million nodes and relationships first, and then we delete the other nodes as well. So what I wanted to say is, if you have an data query, like for instance, imagine this was here not an unwind just for data generation, but it was, for instance, an load CSV, come on, load CSV with headers from, and then I have a file URL as row. Then I could, for instance, say, okay, I want to create this person Hi Flying Meat, sorry, I hadn't looked at the chat because so yeah, Trace Mission was really nice app. So we can just use the row that we have here to create our data. So if I have my row ID, I could say here I use row.name and row.h. and create my data, and then it would, no matter how big the CSV file is, do all of this as well. Cool. And of course, because row is a map, we can also, of course, simplify this into, either we could use APOC map clean to clean out stuff that we don't want, but we can also just say create this person and then just say set p equals row, and then it would just transfer all the properties onto the person. So this could be a large file, right? So like file people.csv. So this is still deleting data. So I'm not sure if it's so this most of the data actually it writes to the database is transaction logs. So if we see databases Neo4j, so you see there's it. There's a transaction log. It might have gone somewhere else now. There, transactions. Yeah. So Neo4j, and here you see that it actually has 3 gig of transaction logs already. So it's writing these transaction logs also to recover the database. Okay. So this is also super useful if you want to do refactorings. For instance, like you want to take your nodes and split out something, or if you want to turn a relationship into nodes and things like that. So a periodic iterate always with the first statement provide the data, and with the second statement do the actual update operation. And remember, parallel through only really works well when you have non-conflicting updates. Otherwise, it can internally block each other. Okay, what else do we have? We can export data. We can create UUIDs, periodic iteration we already showed. So in terms of refactorings, for instance, imagine you have a graph with duplicate nodes. You could, for instance, say, I want to merge nodes, right? So, for instance, I have duplicate people, and I want to merge them by their email address. So I would just group them by their email, and then collect all the same nodes into a list. And then I can just call APOC refactor merge nodes, provide the nodes, and then I could have some options on what I want to do with property conflicts. So do I want to discard them, which is the default, or override? I think discard is the default, or combine into an array, for instance, right? And there's also options to then merge relationships as well, right? So, and it also has the option to merge relationships together with the same type and direction as well, which is very nice. Right. Graph refactorings in APOC are also super useful. Other features that are interesting in APOC is, say, time to live, which allows you to mark. So if you enable that, you have to enable it in the config, but if you have it enabled, then it allows you to mark certain nodes as expired, and then it will expire the nodes after they're not valid anymore. So it has a background operation that kind of checks every, I think, 60 seconds by default if nodes are expired, and then removes them from this. So this is also super useful. What else can we look at? Data conversion. Date conversion we already looked at. So it has quite a lot of stuff for JSON operations. So for instance, I can say return APOC convert from JSON map, I think. So there's a map and an array version of this, because otherwise Cypher wouldn't know the return type of the function, or the data type of this function. So just let's do this. And if I misspelled it, so this is I shouldn't have done the delete of too many. Actually, you should also see stuff being deleted here. Oh no, now I clicked my thing. Okay, then let's just continue in sandbox, because we still have sandbox running here. So for instance, if I want to say return or call APOC help JSON, so there's a bunch of JSON stuff that you can do with APOC. So for instance, you can import and export data as JSON. We can load JSON as we saw. We can load JSON with parameters, which just means you can provide header information and also something like post with, get with, delete, and also payload. So you can really do API calls as well, which is quite nice. So for instance, you could send a GraphQL query with a post request somewhere. Actually, this would be a fun one to try. So remember, we built bus overflow, and bus overflow / GraphQL should have the GraphQL API. Actually, I hope so. And let me see if we have graphical. There's graphical, and you can just say new query bus overflow docs. Yeah. So we can, for instance, get the text here, right? Sorry. All our text in our system, for instance, right? So these are all the text in our system. So imagine we would want to do this from APOC. Actually, we should add a GraphQL query function to APOC. That would be nice. So imagine we want to do this, then we can use call APOC load JSON params. This is our busoverflow.com/GraphQL is our API. Then the next one is headers, which I'll get to in a second. And payload is this, so GraphQL query. And this is weirdly an JSON object. So we should be able to say query : and this is a string. And then I think at least that it was an it's probably can also use APOC format JSON, but so, and then if I put in here in headers method post, then it doesn't do that because I got a 500 method post query tag name. I did something wrong. Okay, but in general, you can use it like this. I have to figure out what the wrong curl command was. I guess. There's no copy as curl here. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to show you is APOC convert from JSON map, right? APOC convert from JSON map. So imagine you have some data in a node property that's actually a bit of JSON string. Then you can say, I have this map here, and it returns you parses the JSON. The JSON functions also support JSON parse objects, so you can also reach into those and do something with those, right? So, for instance, if I remember correctly, and it is just A or so as JSON parse. Or because it's not a nested object. So B, let's see if this works. So we extract the subparse here. So it would do this for all the things. So JSON parse is quite useful if you want to learn more. Either actually APOC docs talk about JSON parse as well, and there should be also a link. Load JSON conversion functions. I think it's in load JSON. JSON parse. Yeah. So there's also documentation for JSON parse, and these are like the operators that you can do on JSON parse. So it's like CSS selectors or XParse, basically. Really nice and useful. And it also streams the data. Oh, that's also something actually cool with APOC load JSON. If you have a JSON line, so one JSON object and then a new line, then it also reads the data streaming, so you get the data also as it comes in, which is really nice. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to show you is real quick. So if you have some data in our database here, which is currently empty on Sandbox, so I just play movies. We just create some movie data. Okay. So usually if I want to export something, I would just call APOC export like cipher or, and then I would give it a file and then some config, but because I can't write to the database here, to the disk here, or it actually allows me to write to this. That's really interesting. So when I don't provide a file here, when file is null, then it actually gives me the statements back as a client. So I can just say yield cipher statements, and then I get the data as cipher statements back, which is really nice because then you can just redirect it to a file and then you have your export stuff. And that works also for other things, like for instance, APOC export JSON yield, what's it called? Oops, so that's an older version of APOC that doesn't have this already enabled. But the current versions of APOC also allow this for other procedures to have you stream the data back to yourselves as well, which is really nice. Database integrations with all kinds of databases. For some of the databases, you have to provide some extra jars, like for Mongo, because it has a bunch of extra things that we didn't want to package by default. Map functions. Parse expansion is a large area itself, so we won't go into that. But something that I want to show you is that you can run cipher functions. So sometimes you need to construct a cipher query and run this. So I can just say call APOC cipher run, and then for instance I can say match n plus label return count down. So this is count. This complains because they have no label, right? So, but if I say with person as label, then we can run this self statement. Sorry, wrong. This should actually be correct. I forgot a plus, I think. Call APOC. Oh, we need to return yield value, return value. And it has a non-optional parameter map. But no, so imagine we have something that where we want to combine this, so we can say unwind, because this is a more efficient statement to get the label count because it